Hello, all you subjects of the internet out there. This is the Aromantic Shipper back again with yet another video. This time I'm going to be discussing a certain plot hole in the Avatar: The Last Airbender series that I never really hear anyone discuss. Now, to be clear, I'm not hating on Avatar. It's one of the greatest series ever made, if not the greatest. Depending on whether or not Mappa uses my suggestions and changes the ending for Attack on Titan in the anime. However, just because a series is incredible does not mean it is above criticism. In fact, soon I'm actually going to be releasing a video where I go through all the small rewrites and alterations I would make to the series in retrospective. Just be forgiving of me, please, because I was pretty tired when I was recording that video and I did it all in one take, so yeah. But you know, Avatar: The Last Airbender is a masterpiece, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. There are problems and oversights, and the Avatar crew was aware of this, and they made fun of themselves in the Ember Island players. But in this video, we are not going to be talking about something like, for example, the sloppy way that the political intrigue in Ba Sing Se at the end of Season 2 was handled. I think a lot of that can be chalked up to censorship and the network not wanting to make things too complicated or violent. So a lot of things were kept very vague.
What did they do to you?
Must serve Earth King! Must destroy!
Did Jet just die? You know, it was really unclear.
Instead, the plot hole we're talking about in today's video is not a minor gripe or a matter of things being too vague to be comprehensible. This particular plot hole single-handedly destroys the entire Last Airbender timeline. And again, no one ever talks about it, which is the weirdest part for me, because it's not as if it's super difficult to notice. And what is this lore-destroying plot hole, you ask? Well, it has to do with Zuko's ancestors, the Fire Lords. See, let me briefly sum up the history of the Fire Nation, and see if you can catch the plot hole. So, Fire Lord Sozin reigned as Fire Lord for many years. In his old age, he used the power of a comet, later renamed Sozin's Comet, to commit genocide against the Air Nation, and spent the remainder of his old age searching for the Avatar. After he died, his son Azulon took over as Fire Lord and carried on a war against the Earth Kingdom. After Azulon died, his son Ozai took over as Fire Lord, and was still the Fire Lord by the time the series proper began. By the time Sozin's Comet reappeared again, 100 years had passed since Sozin wiped out the Air Nomads, and Ozai was still Fire Lord. So, can you spot the plot hole? How on earth did only 2 generations of Fire Lords pass during that time? And you have to keep in mind, Sozin was a crusty old motherfucker at the time he wiped out the Air Nomads. He should have had both children and grandchildren by that time. Azulon and Iroh and Ozai should have already been born by that point, but there are still supposed to be nearly 100 years between that event and the present day. And Ozai doesn't even have a dad bod yet. He's still rocking that
Harder, Daddy.
bod. So I ask, how does this possibly make any sense? Well, let's take a look at the Avatar Wiki to see if we can get some sort of an explanation. Okay, so according to the Avatar Wiki, Sozin was 82 years old at the time that he wiped out the Air Nomads. He died 20 years later at the age of 102, and he ruled the Fire Nation for 78 years. Azulon was apparently born in the exact same year that Sozin wiped out the Air Nomads, which means Sozin was 82 years old when his son was born. How is that even possible? Okay, yeah, theoretically it might be possible if it was like a Walder Frey situation where Sozin just kept swapping out different wives whenever they became too old to bear children, but I sincerely doubt that would be the case since, kids show. But also, even though Walder Frey was still having children at 90 years old, he still had children when he was much younger, and he had grandchildren and great-grandchildren by the time the Game of Thrones story begins. I mean, surely if the Pimpin version of Sozin was a reality, there would be heirs who would have come before Azulon in the line of succession. You want me to believe that Sozin never had any sons before he was 82, or that all of them just died? I don't buy it. especially since Azulan's progeny also face a similar issue to Sozin's, though not quite as glaring. But taking both together just creates a wildly unbelievable scenario for Fire Nation royalty. The Avatar wiki is suspiciously silent on Iroh's age, but it does list Ozai's. It says he was born 55 years after the Airbender genocide, which means that by the end of the series he was 45 years old. Since Azulan was born in the same year as the Airbender genocide, he was 55 years old when his second son was born to him. Doesn't that strike you as a little funny? That the Lord of the Fire Nation would be that old before he would even be able to produce two heirs, especially since there's no indication that Sozin had any other children. I mean, in regards to Iroh, we still don't know his exact age, but it would be pretty ridiculous if more than a decade had passed between the birth of him and his little brother, so let's assume Iroh is 55 by the end of the series. That means he was born when Azulan was 45, which, yeah, just seems a little too old for the Fire Lord to produce his first heir. I mean, if Game of Thrones has taught me anything, it's that David and Dan suck at writing, but also, it is top priority for people of noble families to want to create an heir as soon as possible so the bloodline doesn't just die out. Hell, Ozai even says this outright to his father in the flashback in Zuko Alone when he talks about the importance of continuing the bloodline. But Azulan, and especially Sozin for some reason, waited to have children until ridiculously late dates. What's particularly odd about this is that both Ozai and Iroh do have children much earlier than their father. Zuko should be 17 years old by the end of the series, which means he would have been born when Ozai was 28. And seeing as how Luten was going off to war with his dad at the time that Azula and Zuko were still young enough to play with dolls, if we do assume that Iroh is 10 years older than Ozai, Luten would have been born around when Iroh was 28 as well. So what the hell? How do you expect me to believe this timeline? I mean, are there possible hypothetical explanations you could give to explain this? Yeah, maybe, but in reality the most likely explanation is that this is just a massive plot hole. In fact, I know for a fact it's a plot hole because what the Avatar wiki says is inconsistent with the information presented in the show itself, proving that it's a retcon.
Azula, Fire Lord to our nation for 23 years.
23 years, huh?
23 years.
Well then, if that's the case, who the hell was Fire Lord for those 50 years in between Sozin and Azulan? So yes, this is a plot hole, and a major one at that, and the funny thing is, it's so easily fixable by just adding in about 3 generations to the Fire Nation dynasty. In fact, fixing this plot hole would actually correct other minor inconsistencies in the show too. Like, for example, why did Fire Lord Sozin begin the tradition of killing dragons? He rode a dragon, for crying out loud. I mean, dragons were probably the only reason the Fire Nation were able to conquer the air nomads in the first place, so why would a guy as pragmatic as Sozin just decide one day that it would be in the Fire Nation's best interest to have all the dragons killed, depriving them of their air power until nearly 100 years later when balloon technology is invented? You can fix this plot hole by just having some more Fire Lords between Sozin and Azulan who also impacted Fire Nation history. Like maybe the Fire Lord who came after Sozin was actually really incompetent and tried to go and conquer Ba Sing Se immediately with dragons, but ended up failing and getting a bunch of the dragons killed, which turned the dragons against the Fire Nation. And so later on, a different Fire Lord declared that it was in the best interest of the Fire Nation to have them killed. Overall, it just seems like in the series that Sozin was basically responsible for almost everything that happened in the Fire Nation in the past. And yeah, he was undoubtedly an important leader who ruled for a long time, but even in an authoritarian state like the Fire Nation, a lot would still change over the course of 100 years, with leaders coming and going. This oversight actually ended up bothering me so much that I wrote fanfic about 3 Fire Lords that I made up who came between Sozin and Azulan. It's in the comments down below if you want to read it. I'm pretty proud of myself, honestly. But anyway, yeah, that is the massive plot hole in Avatar: The Last Airbender that I wanted to talk about, because it's just really weird that no one else ever talks about it. And I like my content to be groundbreaking instead of just copying other people. I mean, maybe it's not Lego Ninjago levels of timeline fuckery, but it's definitely close. So now we need to ask, how did such a glaring oversight slip by the creators of the series? I mean, Avatar The Last Airbender has just so much care and attention put into the details and history of its world. So how did the creators slip up with the basic family tree of the antagonists from the first episode, mind you? Well, this might be me giving the creators too much credit, but I think it wasn't a mistake, but a conscious choice pushed by the network to limit the number of ancestors Zuko had, so as to simplify the political history of the Fire Nation so kids would be able to understand it better. If a Fire Lord isn't going to directly impact the plot or appear in flashbacks, why introduce them as a part of history, right? I mean, Game of Thrones is a show made for adults, and even that simplified a lot of the family trees of the noble families from the books, so that audiences could understand things better. It just so happens that in Avatar's case, this oversimplification made the recent Fire Nation dynasty make absolutely no sense. Anyway, I just wanted to rant about this plot hole for a few minutes. Let me know in the comments, did you notice this error before, or am I just now pointing it out to you? Post your comments down below, be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. And as always, remember, just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye!